Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. This is Property Management 101, and for today's video, we're going to be discussing best practices when it comes to things that may be wear and tear, or maybe things you'll be charging back to your residents. As a property management company, you should always have processes in place to ensure you're being fair to residents and owners and still following local and state guidelines when it comes to security deposits. Residents tend to believe that everything is wear and tear, and owners tend to believe everything should be a charge back to the tenant. We as property managers are in the middle to help try to sort some of this out. In many states in recent years, a hot topic in the real estate commissions has been the topic of security deposits, as far as handling them, what you can charge back. This is one of the most common things that residents will file a complaint on. Determining what is wear and tear and what is something that will be charged back can get very tricky at times. Many factors should be considered when you're looking at this dynamic. In this video today, I'm going to share with you 5 things that should help you when it comes to things you should charge back for and things that might be considered wear and tear. The first best practice that I would keep in mind when it comes to handling things that you're going to charge back to the residents or things that you may put in the bucket of wear and tear is the move-in condition report. Think of this form as basically the documentation that the resident is giving to you of how they received their unit. I've heard a lot of tips before when it comes to the condition of the unit when the tenant receives it, and I've heard a lot of individuals say and preach that, hey, you want to make sure you have tons of documentation and videos and pictures of how the unit was given to the resident. The downside of this is only the perspective of the landlord, and as the landlord, you're going to be walking that unit for damages. So you're not really including and getting the sign off for the resident if you don't have a move-in condition report. Personally, for my preference, I think the move-in condition report actually gives you a little bit more weight because it's the resident telling you the condition that they accepted the unit and they're putting in documentation signing off on it. If the landlord just takes a picture of that unit, it doesn't necessarily mean that, hey, that resident received it in that exact same position. Maybe it was weeks earlier than the tenant moved in and it collected some dust. So by the resident giving you that moving condition report, it's always to me the best evidence you have and documentation of how that resident received it. Oftentimes when you're reviewing damages in the unit or things you may charge back to, or maybe things that are on the fence as far as wear and tear or something you charge back for, if you review the tenant's move-in condition report, if they do have it listed, then you don't need to spend any more time debating if it's something that you're going to be charging back for or not. You know if they've listed that item on their move-in condition report, it was there when they moved in, and that's something in most cases you shouldn't be charging back for. The second best practice to keep in mind when it comes to items you'll be charging back for and items that would fall in the wear and tear bucket is you want to expect to have some cost. This is something I find that newer investors and owners really struggle with when it comes to this situation. They expect anything that they receive as a charge when that resident moves out should be charged back to the resident, and that's just not reality in the industry. The Real Estate Commission in most states will deem those as reasonable and necessary costs as you turn that unit ready for the new resident. There will always be things as a landlord or an owner of a property you're going to need to do between two tenants when you're turning that unit. Things like tightening toilet seats, like changing air filters, changing smoke detector batteries, possibly cleaning out light fixtures. And these are things that you wouldn't necessarily want to charge back the tenant for. The third best practice when it comes to things you want to charge back to a resident and things that may fall in that wear and tear bucket is the length of residency. How long a resident lived in that unit is going to be one of the most important factors when you're considering if you're going to be able to charge back for something or if it's going to be considered normal wear and tear. An example of this that I can give, and this is a common one I've seen throughout the years, is this. Let's say, for example, a resident moved into a unit that actually had brand new carpet when they moved into the unit, and that resident lived there for 9 years. Obviously, in this case, if they've lived there for 9 years, they're going to have some wear patterns in different parts of the carpet that has some high traffic spots in that area. If the carpet doesn't have any rips or stains, then in this situation, I would consider this normal wear and tear, get the carpets cleaned, and it will be a situation where you're not going to be probably in a position to charge back anything to the resident, but also the carpet should be in a good enough condition where if you're not going to replace it, then by just simply cleaning it should remove that wear area and make it ready for the new resident. Now, if you were walking a unit in the same situation where a resident moved into a new unit with brand new carpet, but in this example, they only lived there for about 8 months and they moved out and had the same amount of wear to that carpet in those traffic areas, that would be a situation where, because of their length of residency being so much less, that is probably a situation where you can charge back for cleaning of that carpet. Again, if there's no rips and stains in it, and by simply just cleaning it, the carpet should be ready for that new resident. And because of this situation where the residents only live there 8 months, if it does require a cleaning, it is something you should be charging back for, as that tenant has only been there for a short period of time and it's needing to be fully cleaned. I hope you're enjoying this video so far and learning something new. If so, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for future videos. And here are some examples of some different situations to keep in mind. Before I give you a few individual situations I've seen that I would recommend, is that HUD actually has a great web page that actually outlines very clear examples of what they consider wear and tear and what is not considered wear and tear. And if you're interested in reviewing this, I will post the link to that web page in the video description. Now, here are some additional suggestions that I would consider as far as things to charge back to the tenant, or maybe things that fall in that non-charge wear and tear bucket that I would give you today. And these would all apply regardless of the length of stay. The first one would be holes in the wall. So typically, if a resident is actually going to hang something on the wall, if they use something that's smaller than a pen size hole, that is something that I would not charge back to the tenant, as this is a situation where that hole is small enough by simply painting over it, you're not going to probably have a situation where you're going to need to do any wall repair to that. And considering this, that you have to expect a reasonable thing is that the resident's going to hang some things up. Maybe they're posters or picture frames. In either case, with the hole being so small, you wouldn't even notice it unless you walked up to the wall and had a close viewpoint within probably a foot of the wall. You wouldn't even notice it. So this is a very reasonable thing that I would consider wear and tear, because you have to expect the resident to hang some things up. The second thing to consider when you're looking at things that you can charge back for and things that you cannot, when it comes to wall damage, if the resident actually has 2 or more walls that they have actually things that they've damaged to, where you will be charging back to, then you could probably go ahead and charge them back for a full paint, as you're actually going to have to paint at least 2 of those walls in that room. Now, if it is a situation where maybe they have multiple wall repairs done in that room that you'll be charging back for, but all of that is done on one wall, then you could probably charge it back from a partial painting, but I would not recommend charging back a full paint, as their damage was all isolated to one wall only. Air filters. Now, this is something that can get tricky if it is a situation where a resident is responsible for changing the air filter. If you're inspecting the air filter, you should just go ahead and change it every single time a resident moves out before a new resident moves in, so that new resident moving in has a clean air filter. Now, if it is a situation when the resident moves out, if the air filter is absolutely disgusting, it's clogged with dust, it is completely clogged off to the point where it's actually damaged that HVAC unit, it could be a situation where you charge them back for not following the release and properly replacing their air filter enough where it would prevent any damage from the HVAC unit. So that's something to consider in that situation. Another situation when you're looking at air filters, one common thing I've heard is when you walk into a unit and it's a non-smoking unit and you smell the smoke and you kind of say to yourself, why do we have that smoke smell in here? How do I capture that with a picture or documentation? If you look at the air filter, you can often see that black, almost dust to it that is a good actually piece of evidence if they are smoking in the unit. So that's something to keep in mind if you are charging back and you're taking pictures of all the charges. If you're charging them back maybe for a full paint or because of the odor in the room that you're trying to remove, taking a picture of the air filter is actually a really good piece of evidence that you could actually collect. The next thing to consider is carpet patterns, like I mentioned, with the third best practice in this video. So please refer to that third best practice for different things on that as well. And the last thing to consider when you're considering what to charge back for and what not to charge back for when it comes to these topics of wear and tear is the life expectancy of items. So whether it be appliances, carpet, painting, flooring, hardware, anything that has a life expectancy where you have to expect and you have to plan for, hey, this is going to be a capital item that we're going to change out every 5, 10, 15, 20 years. You have to keep in mind if a resident's lived there throughout that life expectancy of that item, even if it was brand new when they moved in, it may not be something that you can charge back for, even if they damage that item. Now, if it is something that they damage that item and it's causing you and your team more work, then that could be something you could charge for, but likely you're not going to be able to charge them the full cost of that replacement of that item. And for a video recap today, keep in mind these 5 things when it comes to things you can charge back for and things you can't charge back for that fall into the wear and tear bucket. Number 1, the move-in condition report. Make sure you're offering this and make sure you're collecting it back from the resident every single time a new resident moves in. Number 2, you have to expect to have some cost when you're turning that unit. Number 3, you want to make sure you're evaluating the amount of time that residents actually lived in the unit. Number 4, keep in mind some of the examples that are listed on HUD's website, as well as what I talked about in this video today. And number 5, the life expectancy of certain items. Keep in mind that if the resident has outlived that life expectancy of that item, you can probably charge them, but you probably can't charge them for a full replacement. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. If so, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for future videos. And if you haven't done so already, please watch our disclosure video as well as my Why I Do This video. If you haven't followed and connected with our LinkedIn and Instagram page, these are great resources to follow up and look at industry news, polls, and video releases. If you have any questions about this video or any of my videos, feel free to leave a comment. I'll be happy to address it for you. Happy leasing!